Welcome to Root Cause. I'm Nune. This is where we get to the root cause of things. Architectural decisions that aged badly, leadership transitions nobody prepares you for, and the hype cycles that keep repeating themselves. If you have ever thought, am I crazy for questioning this? You're in the right place. Last time with Adrian, we talked about how organizations can learn from the gap between work as imagined and work as done. Today, I want to talk about learning in general and learning programming. And it might not be obvious, but my guest and I have a lot in common, which is going to make this either a great conversation or an echo chamber. And we'll find out together. EIMG writes a blog called Bits Complicated. She's a seasoned engineer who just joined Canonical, the company behind Ubuntu. Before that, she was at Anyline, and before that, Accenture, an AI drug discovery company. Her bachelor's thesis was about getting a machine to generate software tests using LLVM and fuzzing, so she has been thinking about machine-written code since before it was a LinkedIn hype. And she's equally into mindfulness, having done various practices, including yoga teacher training. Apparently, we both need to take care of our bags. Talking with Ia while preparing for this episode was a breath of fresh air. She's excited about her new role, excited about programming, excited about learning new things. And I'll be honest about why that matters to me. After 20 years in IT, with the AI hype pressuring everyone, a lot of IT professionals are feeling down nowadays. And I wanted you all to get a bit of that energy back. Ia is here to help me with that. She's here today because both of us reflect a lot about learning itself. I have a whole blog post series about learning to learn. She taught computer science and digital literacy at the Free University of Tbilisi for 3 years. So today we're going to root cause learning and whether the machines we've built are about to make it worse or better. Ia, welcome to Root Cause, and I'm genuinely glad you're here.
Hi, pleasure to be here. I love the name of the podcast. I was immediately very drawn, so I'm very glad I can participate, especially about a topic that's not quite under-discussed, but not framed in a way that I think it should be.
So, as I understood, you have taught at Free University of Tbilisi to non-developers about coding. And my question is, did you need to reframe your thinking, the way you think about programming concepts, in order to teach that to non-coders?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to reflect on. I started out at Free University of Tbilisi at the computer science faculty. Already, like there's so many new things you get confronted with when you start teaching. And when I started teaching the course that was introduced as a mandatory course for technology and designing it, that was very interesting because one of the reasons I was kind of involved is because they already knew I like to yap about technology, and I always make it I always come in with anyone can understand it and it's so beautiful, etc. So I think the thing that I had to confront the most was just kind of adjusting to how much I could expect as an outcome. So I had to kind of scale down a bit on what the speed was of the course, etc. But then I also found how much better the outcome was, how much better the materials were understood.
You said that you're excited and you can yap about programming all the time and how cool it is and all. And I think that brings me also to the question whether you think everybody should learn programming and everybody can learn programming.
So yes and yes, but not because everyone needs to know programming. So a few things happen during this process when you learn programming. First of foremost, not everyone maybe needs to know how to code, but I do strongly believe that everyone should know technology and even has the responsibility to understand technology, whether that's relevant to their field or generally in society. And due to how the education system is set up, many people are shy and reserved about developing their tech skills because they feel like tech friendliness is something innate or something you're drawn to, and then you kind of act on it. But they kind of deprave themselves of developing digital literacy and gaining a lot more additional power in whatever they're doing. And even if we don't use it to our advantage for our career, we use technology every single day, every single hour. And I think it's just a very fundamental human responsibility to really understand the thing that's very involved and intertwined in our life.
Yeah, I think people even might not realize that they are using technology every day. That, Instagram algorithm is responsible for what they see and how they interact with everything around them. So I think that's what you mean, right? With literacy.
Exactly, and the legislation. So I believe that currently there is no legislation that's not related to technology. It's because it's so involved, and both the citizens have the responsibility to understand what kind of laws are being passed, and also the politicians. So I just think that tech literacy is something that everyone really needs to have. And the second reason, and the second thing that happens during this process, it gets mentioned a lot, like why you should learn programming, because it develops your problem-solving skills. If you think about this statement, it's true, but there's nothing special about developing problem-solving skills. There's a lot of different things you can learn and do that develop problems. I don't think anyone goes about their day not solving problems and not developing their problem-solving skills.
Yeah.
But what happens differently when you learn coding is that it's a much more rapid feedback cycle. So you get more confronted to kind of face exactly how you think. You can't blame the mistake on anyone else. It's like your code crashes, it's you. There's no one else that could have done this. So
no external circumstances.
Yeah, no, you can't explain that, the situation. So you're very confronted about your shortcomings in problem solving. You do this very, very quickly. There's very few other environments that allow you to solve, like really kind of test your reasoning so quickly. It's also very accessible. You don't even need to download anything anymore to your computer. You can go on a website and you can kind of start developing this skill immediately.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a doctor in my team who worked as a real doctor, and then he switched to programming. And you're right, he already had problem-solving skills because he had to do that while he was practicing medicine. The only thing that was different is that sometimes I assumed that some concepts were known to him from mathematical or computer science background, but they weren't. But because of that, he developed different set of abstractions, of models in his head. And I'm very proud of him because he then went ahead and was teaching programming, Python, to other people, other non-programmers. And I think they found their common language in that. So that's interesting that you're not talking just about functions and modules and all of that, but you're talking about the way of thinking and how programming can make you aware of how you think.
Yes, exactly. My classes are famous for writing very little code. Like it will be 35 minutes in and we've discussed so many things. We've kind of approached the problem, the description, everything. And the students are like, when are we going to write code? I was like, this is not about code, guys.
They must have loved you. There's another sentiment going around these days because everybody's talking about AI, and people say that nowadays everyone can be a programmer. You just take AI, and even further, people say that you don't need to be a programmer to program, you need to be a domain expert. And once you are good at some specific field, then you take AI, and voila, you have a product that is very specific and tailored to the users of that industry. What do you think about that?
So I understand the negative sentiment that comes with, everyone can be a programmer. For me, it's a positive statement. It's also a statement I think we've been hearing for a long time. So when I started out, it was like, oh no, everyone can learn programming because the modern languages are so easy. Oh, now everyone can develop a web server because we have so many frameworks. Oh, now everyone can be a cloud engineer because Docker made it easier. So this is, I don't know why people get angry that it becomes easier to do things. Of course, some kind of difficulty when it's lost, also some kind of skills and responsibility is lost with it. However, now you mentioned something that's very important, the domain knowledge part. I'm convinced that programmers were not doing good on that part. So when they would come in on the project anywhere, they didn't understand how important domain knowledge is, aside from programming. And actually, the domain knowledge is what determines if what you create will be valuable. You might create a great system, but what is the purpose of it? Because I had this very weird set of domains. I started out in Sound Research Institute. I had to take music classes just so I could be productive in meetings, just so I could understand all the different words that were being used, because I was I don't understand. Yeah, I can do a lot of things, but that doesn't matter if I don't do the things that you need. Same, then I had to learn at Exentio how a microscope works, how imaging works, how fluorescent markers work. And I think that programmers get this false kind of confidence that they're very skilled and that very valuable and they know something that many other people can't do. And then they underestimate how important domain knowledge is. So this situation is kind of the direct demonstration that sometimes domain knowledge is more important than specific programming skills. I'm all for it. I know people are angry, but for me it's bring it on. I think this was long overdue.
Yeah, I think it's, democratization of programming has been, as you said, for a while, and it's not the problem. I think the problem is understating how still it's difficult. It's not just about taking the tool and asking it to write what you want. But the way you say, I had to learn about music concepts, I think anyone who has a good domain knowledge and wants to program something in that domain knowledge also has to learn some basic programming concepts.
Yeah. That's fair. For me, it's the products that get created with AI. They're valuable not because of their code. They're valuable because of their prototyping and proof of concept kind of action. So I don't think it's the product that should be then immediately built upon. But now a lot of people who never had a chance to demonstrate that something they wanted to do would be valuable have a chance to demonstrate that. And within programming. So I think this anyone can be a programmer is more problem within already the programming domain, because seniority in software engineering was always about having a bit more skills than just coding. These were both hard skills in terms of engineering and design and the architecture decisions, diagramming, even documentation, also the social parts. Now, what I don't like is with AI, anyone can produce a very, very good looking document, a very good looking diagram, a lot of documentation. I'm not sure what the impacts of that are. I think it's just kind of a bit disorienting for everyone, because now everyone kind of sounds senior. but I'm interested to see where that goes.
Yeah, you're right. Sounds senior, and maybe now is the time that the industry figures out what it actually takes you to be a senior, not just sounding like, but also having the maybe being able to work in and decide things in an atmosphere of unknown and uncertainty, because there's business has never exact answers to questions. And so I think the more senior you are, the easier for you it is to navigate uncertainty. That's one of the aspects, and you can only learn that by having seen more situations and having to yourself think through them. You know, if AI thought instead of you, you probably didn't build that connections in your head that will help you navigate the next situation.
Yeah, and being stuck for a bit, right? Like spending some time in the stuck situation.
Suffering is part of being senior. And setting aside whether AI can write programs, as a person who has taught programming, do you think AI is a good teacher of programming?
So, inherently teaching is very tied to storytelling, and then it's very personal. So, my teaching core is when I didn't start out learning computer science. I was studying business and marketing, and I was like, hey, if I will want to create something, I will have to rely on developers. And what if I can not find developers? And I started learning to code with that idea that I would build some website or something. And then I fell in love and kind of made the very scary switch to computer science that ended up for me. And then I fell in love even more. And every time I teach, for me, like I've never lost that kind of gratitude that I gave that opportunity to myself, and how beautiful it was to really kind of understand the concepts that I thought I would not be capable of understanding. So for me, that part is very hard to replace. It's ultimately, teaching is very kind of person specific. Human. However, I don't think teacher can be replaced, but even before AI, I was very confident that teachers should be, students should be getting more help from technology. So I really liked Khan Academy. I even volunteered to translate. I then worked at a nonprofit that was translating it to kind of support them in social media before I had switched to computer science, because I like the fact that like this mix of student gets to independently watch the videos. They can pause it, they can watch it again. Then they get to do the exercises that are tailored to them. Because again, that's not the main value of the teacher. The main value of the teacher is to control the process, to understand pupils and students. And the other thing is that also teachers have a responsibility to be good. And I volunteer now at Stanford's program Code in Place. I just did it because, I missed work. Like I worked at Free University some time ago. Now I'm in Vienna. I don't have that chance. So I volunteer whenever I can for teaching. And I was surprised that after every kind of section that you hold with the students, you get this AI feedback. So before the section, you get AI feedback of students have done this and this exercises. They struggle with this and these topics the most, and they understand this and this well. That's very helpful usually for me, because then I go in and I know exactly what's missing and what to cover in the first few minutes, and what to tell them. Hey, it's okay if you don't understand this. And after the section, I get statistics of how long I was talking, how long students were talking, etc. And I think that's very helpful. Like as a teacher, you should get feedback, and you should be like, I shouldn't have to remember the whole class and section to kind of really target the areas which will have most impact.
So basically, it's a tool. It's a good tool, and it should be used as a tool. But there will always be aspects that are human and cannot be replaced.
Yeah.
I wanted to reflect that I very much like your attitude with, well, if I don't know something, I will learn about it and then apply it. And I think a lot of the DevOps movement was developers who cared about infrastructure and who cared about the operation side of things, and they didn't want to only write code. They wanted to also understand how it will be deployed, how will it run in production. And now what you're saying with also product work and understanding domain, that's another step that developers should think, well, it's not only about programming, it's not about programming it well for production, but it also about programming something the end users need. So of course I need to understand the business domain as well. And if a non-programmer can say, well, I feel like I don't understand programming concepts and I should learn them, then it should also be the other way around. If somebody's just joined a domain they don't know and they are a programmer, I think it's fair to say that they also need to learn this part themselves.
Yeah, having ability to code or engineer is not the most valuable skill in the team. It's it was positioned as such because it had like a very long barrier to entry and to even participation. So like others could not participate in the discussion process. So it was gate kept. I think this is kind of having most impact on the borders of the discipline, like how much input you can get. You can now get a product manager code up a prototype proving that what they're aiming for is possible or good or valuable. And yeah, that might be annoying to receive as a person who was like, no, this won't work. But ultimately it's for the better.
At least it's a better way to communicate your ideas. Yeah. One thing that usually bothers me about learning programming with AI or learning anything using AI is that I cannot always evaluate whether the answer from AI was correct unless I know it up front, at least approximately. So, for example, I know programming and I ask AI to evaluate the paths A, B, C and present me with pros and cons. Okay, and then in the result I can read through, I can validate that against my own mental model and see if the answer is valid or not. But if I switch the domain to something completely different and I ask AI to give me some paths, I have no idea whether they are right or not. And some have argued that you can still ask additional questions. I don't know, let's say I ask something about chemistry, I don't understand the answer, then I say, okay, break it down simpler and simpler and simpler until I get to, high school terminology that I do understand. The problem with that, though, is that with every response, there is more uncertainty inside of me that some part of that answer was hallucinated, some part of that answer was outdated. And so with every turn of the conversation, let's say, my uncertainty in the answer of AI grows. So translating that to people who are trying to learn programming using AI, how can they do that without knowing it up front?
Yeah, that's so I think when you ask AI questions about things you know about, you see how biased the responses are and how much nuance they miss. And, even the nuance that's maybe relevant also for beginners, because sometimes it frames things that should never be framed. That like that's if you ask the wrong question, you receive an answer instead of saying, hey, that's a wrong question to ask. And also as the conversation goes on and on, you bring in more kind of non-knowledge about the domain, which the answers depend on what you ask, what you follow up on, etc. It's the answer that was created by you. Ultimately, AI, like the answers you create based on your input. So then you don't have that independent evaluation of something. I like AI for kind of help with, hey, what is this thing called? So then I can go and search for it, because before there was often that, there's certain terminologies that it will, like, you can't Google your way into it. But ultimately, I would trust a human, the kind of high-level explanation for the topic that I'm unfamiliar with, or accept that, like, something that I'm getting might be completely wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other day, I couldn't remember a name of a movie, or sometimes I can't remember the name of the book, and I always ask AI with some very high level explanation of what I remember from the description or the plot, and I thought, this is so helpful. This is where AI is helpful. Just put your high-level understanding of the plot and comes back with an answer. And similar to that, if you don't know how something is called, you can't Google that. So I think this use case that you mentioned is a really valid one.
Yeah, and then you Google it and you get the AI response now. But I use like the Ecosia and others. Even they have AI response, but at least it's like less proof.
Yeah, I think there's a way to disable that, like an ad blocker, AI answer blocker. Mm-hmm. But also, so much content is now AI generated, so it's getting harder and harder to differentiate. Which brings me to the question, are you worried about next generation? Are you worried they are getting stupid? I mean, there was a report around that this is the first generation that has lower IQ test results or something like that. Don't quote me on that. Which, I mean, I don't think IQ tests are a good evaluation of human knowledge, but still, obviously there is a shift. Are you worried about next generation, or you think they'll find their way?
Yeah, I mean, that study was like, that was one of the times when I was like, okay, what are the sources? Because it was all over, and I was like, who decided that? How did they measure? For me, that kind of shift is more representative of the social, political, and economic situation that the world is in, rather than like necessarily either AI, even short form content. Like, we know it's harmful, and the outcomes it has and the outcomes we're seeing are kind of in line with what would happen. But I think ultimately it's like the next generation's problems. First of all, we cannot understand them, we cannot solve them. We can only create a world where they feel empowered to face those problems. I sometimes, like, if I have like some stuff to do on the weekends, I go to the library. I like, removing myself from the distractions, or just like, going, getting coffee. And in the library, I see students still kind of sitting with books or having the, laptop open studying, because ultimately I also had the solutions in the end of the book when I was doing the exercises. I was just not looking, because I understood, like, hey, this, like, I'm learning, I'm practicing. That's not like, I'm not interested in the answer, I'm interested in development. So I think they'll be fine. Also, the new generation programs will be fine. It's just not the same fine that we think is fine. So
yeah, I think the endorphins you get when you finally understand something yourself are so powerful that this will drive people to continue learning themselves instead of just getting ready-made answers.
Yeah, exactly. Even with this like AI coding craze now, I mean, of course, first of all, this is not how it will look, but also people are very, very excited. They're also very, very aggressively burning themselves out. So, this is not sustainable to spend, 18 hours a day just working and building things and like arguing with a chatbot. So I do think that at some point people will be like, oh, this is exhausting, this is not rewarding, etc. Even if they create as much as they want, they will go back to kind of wanting a more sustainable way to build.
You mentioned before that there has always been this sentiment that, oh, programming is easy now because we have higher order languages, or it's easier because we have frameworks. And I think that also people now have this saying that, well, AI or LLMs are just another level of abstraction. So we had assembler, then we have higher order languages, and now we have LLMs. So what's the big fuzz? Do you agree with that analogy?
I don't see it yet. So, yeah, I mean, it is an abstraction, but this is not how, even if it becomes another level of abstraction, this is not how it will look, first of all. Second, it's hard for me to kind of either engage with that argument because gut feeling is like, no, this is not, like, the output is not equivalent to what the other abstraction layers output, but maybe that can be solved. So my take is like, I don't know. I don't like the statement, but I can't elaborate.
Yeah, I think a lot say that it's the difference is determinism. The difference is that with higher order languages, you still expect your expectations of what the program would do would match the reality, but that also can be pushed back maybe with writing enough tests for the output of the LLM to be reliable. But I know you had an article about how LLMs are not that good at writing tests, they overmock, and how people need to learn about this. How did you call it? Triangle of testing?
The testing pyramid.
Yeah, testing pyramid.
Yes, they're just because I'm like, test driven, the development kind of best practices person. I do have very strong opinions about tests, and yes, we simply don't have enough good tests to train AIs on. A lot of the tests are over engineered at the wrong abstraction level, testing the wrongly designed units, and that is what has been fed to AI. So the AI will generate exactly that. Even though, like, for smaller things, like, I usually get my units straight before I kind of hand over to the AI, and then I can ask it like, hey, like, I can just say, hey, this is too many mocks, etc. So who is responsible then for defining the tests or making sure that the tests are implemented correctly? There's a lot of green check marks you can get. I think everyone sees that AI is like, hey, yeah, complete, and it is not complete. Something has been deleted in the process. Yeah. What you asked for is the opposite that was implemented. So that is my experience, and because of that, I don't have confidence yet in the output.
Yeah, here are 1,400 tests and they are all green, but the value of it is not high. There's another thing that I keep going back and forth, even in a single day. This is conversation-based development. I mean, at first I was very much against it. I was like, how can you develop something through a conversation that is so unreliable and unpredictable? If I have that conversation, it will get one result. If Ia has that conversation, it will have another result. Then sometimes I think, isn't it wonderful that I can adjust things while I talk? And there are new things sometimes coming out from the conversation. So what do you think about coding through chat versus maybe building a pipeline that creates code?
I can't wait for the next way we will do this. So I'm fine with chats, but right now it's just chat. For me, it looks a bit differently, that there is chat and then something gets determined. Then there's something else happens. We do know that as the chat goes on, the performance degrades. My approach now is like, if I had to correct like too many things, I don't move forward. For me, that's like a failure, because failure is not like the outcome failure, it's a process failure. So I was like, okay, so something in my setup or my prompt or my skills, etc., is not working with the way I want. So then I usually go and adjust that instead of kind of chatting along. I try to keep the chats because for me it's like, if you don't have a reliable process and you have to kind of interfere all the time, then it's not a good process.
Yeah, you are so right. I wrote an article about how I get myself out of the development by not having this conversation, but rather controlling every step of, I don't know, spec generation, then from spec to plan, then from plan to code. And even though this sometimes doesn't feel as productive as having the conversation, at least this is a workflow that is controllable and improvable, because you have artifacts by the end of each step that you can iterate on and figure out, oh, I probably didn't give enough context, or I didn't formulate it correctly. And so I think you're very right. It's about, if you don't get the answer correctly, this is your chance to improve your process and not just give me the end result. It's all about patience.
Yeah, and when I discovered that, it was one of the first times I got kind of bit warmed up a bit more to the using AI in development, because then I could be like, yeah, okay, so this is the hard part, right? Like if that happens, I have to stop and start over and improve, because in the chat you don't start over, you don't improve, you just keep asking it to make no mistakes. When I saw that there's something about that I could kind of engineer, that was one of the first things that kind of hyped me up a bit, because before I was like, yeah, okay, I can create things, but like, what do I do in that process? Just kind of type things out, know things.
Yeah. And then every conversation turn, of course, adds into the tech debt. And I know you wrote about tech debt and you don't like the term, and you said, let's call it tax. Can you say a bit about that, why it should be a tax and what's the difference?
So it does generate a lot of tech debt. I kind of call it a legacy as a service, like the whole product. Like, have you ever wanted to get legacy right away that no one understands? I'm not saying it's not how we will code and stuff. Yeah, we will just accept it. We'll work around it. Yeah, sure. But in general, about the tech debt is that it's sometimes discussed as something separate that exists because someone didn't do a good job, and that needs like to have its own kind of time allocated to be fixed. I don't think tech debt should be looked as a failure. It's part of the process. It's just like passage of time and changing of requirements, etc. And it also, even though it's important to tackle it, I also usually don't push for these like initiatives to address tech debt, because first of all, how do you know that the time that you're putting into addressing is worth it and it's a productive outcome? And that's why if you look at it as a fee, then now you can tie the fee into tasks. You can be like, okay, so I will address the tech debt proportional to how much time I spend with that tech debt. Or if there is some module that everyone always forgets how to work with because it's complicated, and you have a task and you spend like 3 days remembering, just like orienting yourself around again, now it makes sense to address the tech debt a bit for like maybe an extra day or two, because you will save some time for the next iteration. But you can't just say, hey, now I will spend some time getting rid of tech debt. You don't get rid of it. It's just a fee.
Yeah, I hated those sprints that were, let's just address tech debt in this sprint, because as you said, every ticket is about bringing business value, and you could, and I think it takes a lot of awareness on the business side and a lot of awareness on the engineering side, that they say, okay, this is a business ticket. It sounds very easy, but underneath there is a module that nobody wants to touch. So please, let's do, I don't know, an estimation of 8 instead of 5. Do they still do that? Do they still estimate things in Fibonacci numbers, or am I behind?
I remember this very funny conversation we had when there was, I think, planning meeting, I think, or a retrospective or something. And then they were like, we can't go on like this if we don't allocate time to address tech debt. And the product manager was like, are you not doing that already?
Yeah, the
Is that
assumption
not
is that
included in the estimation? Because they're like, why do I have to think about your tech debt? Which is very, very true.
Yeah. As long as it has an explanation, and I think it's not. The engineer should not estimate the intellect of business people. That if they explain the tech debt and why they need the time, those people will understand. They're not they're enemies. We're all in the same boat, driving to one goal.
Yeah, many won't even need a lot of explanation, because that's the thing, that like a lot of product managers do have that trust in the process. They're like, the engineers knows how much that tech debt needs to be addressed, how many resources should be put into it, and then that puts us for being responsible that we don't overuse those resources. So then there has to be a better way to assess and address those kind of topics.
Besides tech debt, I feel there's something that I call learning debt that's emerging. This is every time that you want a ready-made answer, you ask AI and they're fulfilled with the answer, instead of double, triple, quadruple checking it, and by checking it, developing these mental connections that will help you next time. Do you feel this way as well? And how do you address that?
Well, so I think there's just so many different ways you can use AI. You can use it for something you already know. You can use it to help to learn something you're learning, and then you can use it to not learn something and get the productivity. And for me, it's sufficient to be clear about which kind of act I'm engaging with, because it can be very useful in kind of giving you basic vocabulary in something, just to kind of get common ground, and not, without putting it weeks to kind of get introduced to the whole topic. But if I want to learn something, I do kind of. So I never get the illusion that I learned something just because AI explained to me and I understood. And as long as you do that, you can get all the different benefits without just getting a false sense. If I'm learning a new framework or a new language, it's not that I don't even, like, for the first tutorials and reading the docs, I write the code. I don't even have the second monitor set up. I explicitly kind of look at what's written there, go back to mine, and try to write it out. Because, I'm developing a specific skill. I can ask AI to write it in, and then I won't have the understanding of exactly why everything is there.
Yeah, funny. It's still about being aware. As long as you are aware that you are engaging, as you said, in the act of getting ready-made answer and not learning, fine. But don't mindlessly use tools. I guess that's the message.
Yeah. Plus, what I've noticed is that, like, because these answers kind of get now answered very quickly for the brain, and the brain is like rewarded for asking an interesting question and getting an interesting answer, and then it generates more useless questions. You maybe like would have never spent time to explore and would have moved on with your life without knowing them. And now it's like, and what about this? And what about this? And I'm so basically now sometimes I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm restricting that time. So today I will have
that's
that.
so true.
Yeah.
I compare now talking with AI with social media, like one more reel, one more thing to watch, one more interaction, because it's again bringing us to this very quick satisfaction, and you
of curiosity is an widely positively understood thing, because you don't have that much of it. You need to control your curiosity.
Yeah, same. Also, there used to be a term, feature creep, is where you would create too many features, and nowadays with AI, it's like triple, because it itself says, yeah, why don't you also implement this and that? It will only take a day, where in fact it won't. It will bring you more bugs and more integration. So you have to control even your feature building nowadays to not go wild.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people are raising, and I think I look forward to this kind of push of, oh no, we can do more features, so we will then lead to a wave of minimalism. And I'm just sitting back and waiting for it. Like, there's no reason to kind of resist this cycle. Also, it's important. Like, we're getting so many different learnings that we will apply later, even if what is happening now is like does not look that elegant and stuff. It's kind of a necessary step. But I do hope it will be understood that it's not, more features that we're missing from technology.
Yeah, you are the third person I talk on this podcast, and you are the third person kind of saying embrace the chaos instead of fighting it. So embrace this time of hype. You cannot stop it. You can only watch and learn from it, and wait for it to calm down and be smart. And because you had this reflective mind during it, you will be ahead than others.
Yeah, and I even so, especially for the more responsible, I'm using air quotes because you can perceive yourself as being like a responsible engineer, and then everything that everyone is doing is very irresponsible. Like the people who are on the cutting edge, like coming up with the most interested uses, are insecure. They're like, you open your eyes when you hear about like why would you do that, etc. And but they're the ones pushing the limits right now. So maybe it's just not the time to be responsible, and it can be kind of you can wait until we get enough knowledge to be responsible again.
Interesting. Yeah, like children, it's a playtime now, and then we will learn. There's always in my head that programming is it craft or is it art? And I think a lot of people get the satisfaction from both sides. From one side, the craft side of it and the art side of it. Do you think AI is taking away this joy somehow because we're not writing code anymore?
Yeah, so depending on what was bringing joy in the process, it might take away, it might bring more. So I liked, I heard it somewhere. It's like, if you liked the building part, it's a bit disorienting. If you like the creating part, then this is like Disneyland. So depends on which. And like I said, even though in the beginning for me it was like, I was very much, even though I'm also like very outcome oriented, I had this special attachment to the process because I spent a lot of time and effort making sure I was good at it. So when this appeared, I was like, yeah, okay, I can click yes, and then I can check if it's correct. And so for me, it didn't sound like engineering. However, as the ecosystem kind of develops a bit, like we already discussed, there are a lot of different things you can engineer now. And finally, mandatory token usage will slowly kind of come to a reasonable settlement, so that also you're encouraged to be more smart about what you do. And then it will be like you will finally start seeing again that there are those who can do this better, and that there are those who cannot do it as good because they didn't put in that time to the process. I think that's just what people were kind of insecure about in the beginning, because how do you prove you're better at using AI? It's just a bunch of markdown files everyone installs, and then you're like, yeah, what am I supposed to be proud of? But I think slowly we will start getting the ecosystem where you can be proud again of something you did and you engineered.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of sunken cost fallacy in this, because we were talking with my colleague. We worked together 20 years ago, so we're both fresh out of university, and all we did was write unit tests and write mocking frameworks. And when I look back with AI now, it was like, did I waste all those years? And that's why I think a part of us feels like, oh, we invested so much into this, so we can't let it go. But you're right that even using AI, as you said, we're getting to things that are truly difficult, and these truly difficult parts that AI cannot handle are the ones that will give us satisfaction.
Yeah, and for me, it's like, if then I can't have, based on my skills or expertise or something, good enough edge, because now, everyone can look like an architect, I'm just gonna go study something else and do something else. I like learning, so who cares?
Exactly. As long as you know how to learn, and I think once in your life, once you solve some particular problem, and to be honest, also problem of making money. So you solved it once. It gives you some confidence that you can solve it the second time and the third time. And as long as you have this confidence that I can learn something, then you will be fine. Maybe you won't be a millionaire, but you will be fine.
Yeah, and it's not like the skills are lost. I do believe that they will be visible. They're already visible, and they will be even more visible. Like, when every domain switch, when I switched to programming and computer science, something that I brought was kind of this appreciation and valuing communication, because I had spent a little bit of time learning, and many times, especially initially, what gave me edge was not that I was a better better at coding, but I was better at the communication part, or understanding the value of communication. So whatever changes in the environment, you can always add more skills, add more knowledge, and use then your interdisciplinary thing as an advantage.
Yeah, that is very true. I also got a question, and maybe as a teacher, you can help me answer that. I got a question of how can I get into cloud engineering, and I think I'm a bit worried, because I'm hearing that companies who are hiring, they demand more and more from people. Yeah, first you were good if you knew Python, then you had to know thousands of frameworks, then you had to also know how to work with containers, and you had to be an expert in at least one cloud, and now you also need to know the tools and be AI native, whatever that means.
Yeah.
So what do you advise these people who want to become an engineer, or who want to maybe switch from one engineering discipline to another?
Yeah, that kind of word soup creep was already kind of getting bad even before the current situation. I love when they also like a position asks for knowing multiple competing frameworks or tools. It's like just for good measure, also like know the alternate, be an expert. So it's so discouraging, I think, if someone, especially junior, is browsing these roles. And the problem with these like kind of HR ads is they always get edited. So like a lot of things don't get deleted. Like they have a template that started 10 years ago, and every time they need someone, they're like, so what should we add here? So nobody says like remove this and this. They just like add more word soup. I think now in general, everyone needs good interdisciplinary competitive advantage. So I just don't see how someone can prove especially like very, very quickly, that they're a better engineer than someone else, because on the surface, like quick look is not good anymore. Anyone can create like, you know, learn the words and, you know, have projects on GitHub, buy stars. Just there's so many things you can do that's hard. So it's hard to just stand out even if you're genuinely better. And you know, in the junior level, it's not about necessarily being the best. It's just like, this is a junior person, this is company's responsibility to take in and train and develop. So yeah, I think a lot of people have asked me, hey, should I learn programming? Yeah, for like the benefits, yes. For a profession, maybe, if you know where to apply it. Like the use, before it might have been like, oh, if you're a programmer and you have domain knowledge, you have a competitive advantage. Now I think people can use this to be like, oh, I have domain knowledge and I'm using programming as a competitive familiarity, that I can use these tools better, etc. So yeah, I do think the current job market, you need to be way more strategic about it, more targeted, understand where you want to get to, and really be beyond the skills, basically.
So back to maybe domain knowledge, and unless you want to go and work on the frontier of building new models and creating new frameworks, then probably programming pure is what you need to know. But if you will be probably safer if you like some specific domain and you, on top of that, say, I learn programming so I can work with that domain better.
Yeah, well, I think that's true.
So I'm a big bookworm. Everybody who knows me knows that. And I developed yet another tradition for this show when I ask people about books on certain topics. And I think today I want to ask, what was the book that made you want to learn something and give you this spark of curiosity and wanting to learn new things?
So one book that I read a very long time ago, but kind of has been on my mind a lot recently, is the Asimov's, both the iRobot and his short stories. There is, especially the ones where he described how do we create artificial intelligence, and there's this one very short and very beautiful story, The Last Question, and they're training intelligence and they're just like feeding books to it. And when I was reading, I was like, that's so cute. Like, that's such a, you know, imaginative way. And then we created it by feeding it books.
And now we are living in that reality.
Yeah, but he could already kind of see that already so long ago. And something that I've been reflecting on the most is when I was reading iRobot, I was confident robot psychologist was my dream job. Like I wanted to
I
be
love it,
psychologist.
yes.
I was like, if I had this, that would be so good. And facing that kind of truth of maybe I don't want to be a robot psychologist, when I kind of have that technology so readily available, that was very shocking to me, because, you know, there are so many stories we tell ourselves, and it's always very interesting to get kind of confronted by the truth.
Yeah, confronted by reality. Is iRobot the one that also introduces the 3 laws of robotics?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think science fiction is very important. I mean, it helps us imagine these paths, and it's very interesting to live in these days. I mean, we're seeing some of the things that we read about from the books that were in 60s and 50s now being born and applied in a very different way, from one side in a very different way, from another side in the same way. So it's very interesting. I always go back to this book from Heinlein, Have Spacesuit, Will Travel, not because it has any AI components to it, but mostly because it brings me back the love of learning. The main character there, he gets a spacesuit, and he genuinely gets interested into how the spacesuit is built. He gets to strip it down and put it back together, and these pages of him doing that always gives me back this curiosity and wanting to learn something. And I'm also reading now one book from 1994. It's called Permutation City. And it's about people being put into a sort of VI world and exploring the generated models of conscience versus biological. And it's also so relevant for today because I think a lot of people are starting to, besides having AIs and LLMs, understand that it's more going to be about ways how we can apply biology together with AI.
The intelligence part is interesting because now we kind of choose either human intelligence or the standard statistical machine, like more primitive machine learning, or the LLMs. So hopefully soon we will see interesting combination of these as opposed to just kind of going with one closed box attitude.
Let's root cause this one last time and summarize what we talked about. We talked about teaching and about learning and about how AI can be applied in a smart versus automatic and unconscious way. If you had to root cause it, not the surface reason, not people are lazy or tools aren't good enough yet. What's the real root cause of the risk that we collectively get worse at learning? What's your take on it?
Yeah, there's a lot of different reasons to be concerned about it, and very dangerous implications of this killing the populations and having intelligence as a service. I don't like where things are being pushed. It's definitely a nightmare. But let's set this aside and say that wasn't a problem, politically. Learning is, for me, a fundamental rebellious activity and one that kind of brings you power. You rebel against a lot of things and you gain control over something that was kind of unreachable for you before. And you kind of rebel against time itself, not only because you slow down biologically aging or reverse even aging in the brain, but because you kind of allow yourself to become vulnerable again and be an open book and find the child that's inside. So for me, it's like you get to be a kid again. And that's one of the most precious things you can do to yourself. It's kind of almost like magic. So it's, for me, very important to maintain and continue learning and, see the risks and face them and rebel against them.
Yeah, I think that's part of not aging, right? Having this spark of learning, and we must be conscious of not letting our interactions with AI rob us of that feeling.
Yeah,
No. Any practical maybe recommendations, like, I don't know, breathe 5 minutes a day before talking to AI?
No, I have strictly no AI days. So I'm always, not because I'm saying it's necessary, because I just don't know yet what the best approach is. So I always just try to be conscious of what I'm doing and what I'm engaging with. So I'm like, yeah, so now I'm using it to kind of ask random questions. Let's not use too much for it. Now I'm using it for something I actually don't know and don't even want to do. I just want to get this done. I'm using it to, do kind of assist, etc. So I just try to both limit to not spend too much time using it in one specific way, and also to give myself time without it to kind of not be too impacted by whatever the implications are. We don't know yet.
Yeah, these blissful hours when your token limit is reached and you can just not use it. Another habit that we have, another tradition that we have on the podcast is that every guest leaves a question for the next guest. And previous question was from Adrian, who said, "What surprised you the most in the discipline you were the most comfortable with?"
Side note, I've been thinking about this so much, and it's so hard to think of an answer.
I think it's hard to even think what is the discipline you are most comfortable with. I think that part of the question is already hard.
Yes, it's a tough one. So I guess so. Something. I mean, I was also surprised, but a lot of people find that surprising in that discipline is how different engineering is from what it looks or sounds like. First of all, how many social skills are involved and how much kind of humility is involved, cooperation, etc. Everyone, the stereotype is kind of you get on, write a lot of code, and that's so much fun. But also fun is having those barriers that do exist in real life and real projects, and developing skills to work with them and confront them.
Yeah, I like that a lot, because it's like with the democratization of programming, with everybody talking about programming now, I think a lot more people understand or start to define and put into words what is software engineering, not just programming, software engineering. What is it? It's not only about code, it's way more than that. And it's understanding your peers, understanding people from other disciplines. I don't know, even having a way to limit yourself on computer time. This is, again, back in the conversation, right? Everybody's talking about it now, because whether you were a programmer or you're just starting using AI tools, I think we're spending more and more time in front of the computer. And yeah, yoga is what will save you.
Yeah. Yeah, and mindfulness practices have helped me so much
True.
also to be a better engineer, because sometimes you kind of need to set your ego aside, step back a bit, also like look at things. So this meditative thing is very useful.
Yeah, also good for your back again.
Yes.
Take care of your back. Alrighty, so yeah, maybe try not to make the next guest think this much. So what is your question to the next guest?
So my question is, if you had to start out your career or learning journey, or had to pick a major right now, would it be different, and what would it be and why?
Yeah, nice. I think that would also define some of those. What do we advise the juniors into the world? Although, again, we're always biased with our past, with the situation that we're in. and we can't know the future.
Yeah.
That's simply the
Yeah,
truth.
so I don't think I did the favor that you asked for and asked easy questions.
Yeah, true. Great. So this was EIMG, a person who loves programming and loves learning, and as we learned, also loves teaching. And if today's conversation made you think or made you feel more inspired, share it with someone you care about. I'm Nune, and let's keep root causing this.
Thank you, Nune.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. I mean, you were so prepared. I love it so much. This is very...
Thank you.